So what we're going to do now is we're going to turn here and make our way at great speed right to the back of the Titanic building, and we're going to go on to the slipways where the Olympic class liners were built. Now at one stage you had Titanic and Olympic, almost identical twin sisters, being built side by side together. Now Olympic, she was started first, launched first, hit another ship sadly, had to come back in for some repairs. While she was being repaired, they launched Titanic. Then once Olympic left for the second time, they built another ship on her slipway called Britannic. Now Britannic's known as the Forgotten Sister because sadly she never was used as a passenger liner. Because war broke out, she became a hospital ship and was sadly sunk during the war. So we all know what happened to Titanic, so that just left Olympic serving as one of the largest cruise ships in the world right up until she was scrapped in 1934. Now over to your left hand side there, you see the port of Belfast at the moment is very quiet. We are however expecting a lot of cruise ships to come to Belfast. Last year we had 117, this year we're expecting 150 cruise ships to come here. So they're even talking of building a dedicated terminal further along. Now if you turn to your right here and look at the Titanic building, you see the wings of the building look like the bows of ships. The one on the left is Olympic, the one on the right is Titanic. That's the height of Titanic's first deck as she sat on the slipways being built. And if you look in front of you there, you see a ramp surrounded by glass. That's the ramp Titanic would have sat on as she was being built. Her nose would have been where the back of the building is there on your right. And if you turn to your left now, her stern would have hung out over the water's edge at the far end of the slipways there. Now the glass wall here on your left is a memorial to the passengers who were lost. You've got the names of all the first and all the second class lost, and most of those who were lost in third. And every year on the anniversary of the sinking, there's a candlelit service held here in remembrance of those who were lost that night. Now we're moving across the slipways through the gantry and into Olympic's outline now. So you see how narrow the ships were. Now over to your left, this glass wall, the first column of names on that is the remainder of the third class lost. Then you've got the names of almost 700 crew who went down with Titanic. You also have the names there of 8 shipyard workers who died whilst building and launching Titanic. Now for a ship of her size and expense, Harland and Wolff expected to lose 15 people in the construction. So they were quite pleased that it was only 8, a very different way of looking at health and safety than what we do today. Over to your left, all of this rough uneven ground that you see, that is all that remains of the original slipways. It slopes down and then stops. In the 1970s, somebody thought that a car park would look nice here. Now over to your left, beside us you see some grass areas. Well, they represent the proportion of the lost in each class aboard Titanic. So you see first and second there looking very similar. Then you get to third class and crew down by the water and you see a big difference. Over in Titanic's outline, they've sketched out where lifeboats would have been, where funnels would have stood, and they've placed wooden benches in the exact spot where benches stood on Titanic's promenade deck. So this is a really nice place to come for a wee stroll, and if you stay until it gets dark, the outlines of the ships light up blue and the building itself all lights up. Now we're coming up to the water's edge. This is where Titanic was launched from all those years ago. When she was launched from here, she was basically an empty shell. What they did was they towed her out to a dock further along where it was deeper, and they spent 10 months fitting her out. After that, she was taken along to the Thompson Dry Dock, where she had her engines, boilers and propellers installed. Now, if you look over to your right-hand side there at the slipways and try and imagine them going down at their original angle, it took just 62 seconds for Titanic to be fully launched from here. And if you can picture what a crowd of 100,000 people looks like, that's how many people were here to see Titanic be launched. And most of those people got charged a shillings admission fee. Now, over to your right on the slipways, those iron posts that you see, they're there to represent the Arrow gantry crane system. Those posts are only 1/3 of the original height of the gantry. Now, looking at the Titanic building, not only do the wings of the building look like the bows of the ships, they also form the points of a star if you look down on it from above. And you see the way the sunlight catches the raised metallic tiles? That brings to mind ice and stars, as in White Star Line. So a lot of thought has gone into that. I like this road because this is where the tram hits its top speed. So everyone hold on really tightly now, because any minute now you're going to start feeling the G-forces as we hurtle down the road here. Okay, that's our top speed now. And if you look over to your right, these shipping containers, or these lorry containers, that's to stop people photographing a £3 million set that they built for a wee show called Game of Thrones. Now, for our younger guests, Game of Thrones, it's a wee bit like Peppa Pig, but with dragons. And there's a very good view of that through those gates there. Now, this building on your right, that's the Titanic Exhibition Centre, and that's where they have the touring Game of Thrones exhibition at the moment. Now, to your left here, this large building on your left-hand side is the Titanic Film and TV Studios, where they filmed part of Game of Thrones. Anything to do with King's Landing or Westeros was filmed in there, so the Iron Throne itself lived in there. Now, they finished filming, and another little known film called Star Wars #9 actually filmed in that building. The Game of Thrones prequel series is going to be filmed partially in that building as well. Line of Duty that's on at the moment, that's filmed here in Belfast. Although you'd never know it from watching the show. And Superman Krypton, that's filmed in Belfast as well. Just coming down towards Hms Caroline, you see her over on your right hand side there. She was built in Liverpool in 1914. In 1916, Caroline took part in the largest naval battle to date, the Battle of Jutland. She's now the sole survivor of that battle, and she's opened up here as a maritime museum. Sadly, the last tour was at 4 o'clock today, but if anybody would like to come back another time, do say you were on the Wee Tram and I will give you a discount. So a quick video about Caroline. So on Caroline's deck there on the right, you see replica guns, torpedoes, ammunition. There's a cafe, a gift shop, and even a cinema on board. That large shed-like structure in the middle is a training hall that was added in the 1920s. And she is very often used as a cinema. Last year they showed Jaws, Piranha, E.T. and the Goonies. So if you go onto their Facebook page, you'll see what they're going to be showing next year. Now, if you look behind the front of the ship there, directly in front of us, you see a building with a clock tower on top of it. That is the pump house connected to the Thompson Dry Dock. Now, sadly, the dry dock tour is now closed, but that is well worth checking out sometime. At one stage, she was one of the first ever Wren's bases, the Women's Auxiliary, was trained there. And she was also a prototype aircraft carrier. They picked the ship up with a system where they could launch biplanes. So quite a unique vessel, that. on the right hand side, you see the Lagan boat tours doing a wee tour there, and where the coal ships unload their cargo, that's where you would see the large cruise ships that visit Belfast. They would pull up along there. So there's going to be a special dedicated terminal for those passengers in the very near future. Now, up ahead of us there, you see the back of the Titanic studios, and to the right of that is a little walkway that connects this area to the slipways. At the far end of that walkway is a green glass cylinder building, and inside that is something that they call the Great Light. And what that is it's a 130-year-old lighthouse bulb that used to stand in a lighthouse on the Copeland Islands, and that would have guided ships along the coast and up towards Belfast Harbour here. Now, there aren't very many of these old-fashioned lighthouse optics left now, and on very special occasions it illuminates the whole area here. So the walkway and the Great Light are new additions to the Titanic Quarter. Every year they do try and add something new. In the near future they're going to be putting some old steam cranes on display, and we'll get a sneaky look at those as we go into the old abandoned part of the shipyard. Now, if you look down on the ground to your left here, right beside the tram, there's a wee stretch of cobbled street with some iron tracks on it. Those are some of the last remaining tram tracks in Belfast now. And trams played a very big part in the shipyard story. So I'll play you a wee bit of video about those. Now, this area that we're travelling through is known as the Alexander Works of Harland. And if you look over to your right hand side, you'll see the three cranes that I was talking about earlier. As you can see, there's a wee bit of restoration work to be done there, and those are steam-powered cranes dating back to the 1950s. And we're coming up on the entranceway to the Game of Thrones castle set. So you'll see that again as we come past this wee building.
Yeah. Mama.
So the Alexander Works during the mid-1960s, when shipbuilding was at its height here, one ship a week was leaving here having been built in Belfast. Sadly, when shipbuilding took a downturn in the 80s and 90s, to cut their costs, Harland & Wolff demolished the buildings and sold off all the land. So there is a 25-year regeneration programme in place for all this waste ground. We're only 11 years into that, so there's a lot still to happen here. Now, we're approaching Thompson. Thompson was built in 1974 and is 348 feet high. And if you look up to the top of the crane, lean out to the left and look up right to the top, you see a red building with an arm and a little glass bubble underneath. That glass bubble is the crane driver's cabin. They get in a lift inside the leg and go up to the top. The wee red building has a bathroom and kitchen area. The cranes are also trains because they run along these train tracks along the dock here. And you see those things by the cranes? Those are the legs for offshore wind turbines. So that is what Harland & Wolff predominantly make these days. They build those wind turbines. They work on dismantling and repairing oil rigs, and they also refit cruise ships now. So it's nowhere near as busy as it used to be. They used to build super tankers, oil tankers, all manner of things here. The last ship to be built in Belfast was called the Anvil Point, and that left back in 2003. But the cranes are still being used today. Sometimes you'll come down here and you'll hear sirens echoing all around the shipyard, and the cranes start to move along towards each other at 4 miles an hour. So you have to be watching them very carefully to see them move at all. So the second crane that we're approaching now, this is Goliath. Goliath was built in 1969 and is 315 feet high. So he is Samson's older, shorter brother. And both cranes at one stage were painted white, and then they were painted yellow to increase their visibility. And they're named after two horses that used to work in the shipyard, Samson and Goliath, although the horses were obviously named after the biblical giants. So now we're just coming up to our last gate that we have to open and close, and we're going to do that. I'll show you a wee bit of video footage of the cranes in motion as we do that. Because if you did want to give it a go, there's the next best thing beside us on the right hand side. This is vertigo indoor skydiving. You put on a wingsuit and a massive fan blows you up in the air and it's like floating. And over on the left hand side, this area beside us is shortly going to be redeveloped as a shopping centre. There's going to be cinemas and a multi-storey car park there as well in the near future. Now way off in the distance to the left there is Prony, Public Records Office of Northern Ireland, and people come from all around to retrace their family trees in there. If you're a UK resident, you get using their files and computers for free, and they've got a really nice coffee shop and cafe in there, so that's an interesting thing to do, maybe on a wet day here, which we never get, obviously. And to your left is the Belfast Metropolitan Training College. Very busy technical college, and definitely they keep the Dock Cafe busy. And in front of us there you see that red brick building. That used to be Harland and Wolff's headquarters in Belfast. For a long time that building sat empty and derelict. Just about a year and a half ago it opened up as the Titanic Hotel, and if you've not been in for a wee look around, I do suggest nipping in and having a look about. They like people having a look around. It's a cross between a 5-star hotel and a museum. There's the drawing offices where they designed Titanic. There's Thomas Andrews' office and Lord Perry's office. There's photographs of all the ships that were built in the yard. So it really is a fascinating building. Also in the building there on your right hand side we're coming up to now are some green gates. Those are the original Shipyard Gates. There was a workforce here of about 1,000 people when they were building Titanic. Those gates were only open for 15 minutes in the morning. So you can imagine just how busy it was here. If you were unfortunate enough to find the gate shut, you got turned away and you didn't earn anything that day. So everybody was down here in time. Now over to your left hand side, that little white ship there, that is Nomadic, the last remaining White Star vessel anywhere in the world now. I'm going to play you a wee video about her.
Our next tram stop is here at the SS Nomadic. I can still sometimes hardly believe that this ship exists. It's almost too good to be true. She actually served the Titanic, built alongside her here in Belfast, and carried passengers out to her at Cherbourg. Until a couple of years ago, she was lying in a scrapyard where she was rescued, brought back to Belfast, and as you can see, she now looks as good as she did the day that she first left Belfast over 100 years ago.
SS Nomadic is the last White Star Line ship in existence anywhere in the world. She's known as Titanic's sister. It was built here in Belfast way back in 1911 by the same men who built the Titanic. She's a real survivor. She came back to Belfast in 2006, but during her life she's been everything from a minesweeper to a Japanese sushi restaurant in Paris. So please come on board. We're here to welcome you. Some of the most famous passengers that boarded Titanic boarded this very ship. Benjamin Guggenheim, the unsinkable Norman Brown, John Jacob Astor, who was the richest man on Titanic.
So if anybody's wanting to get off here and have a wee look around Nomadic, this would be your stop. Just raise your hands, otherwise We shall just move on and go finish our tour at the Titanic sign. Okay, so we'll move on then. Yep.
Only on this one special occasion, Chris, you may.
Okay.
So now, if you look at the back of Nomadic there, you see a French flag flying. That's because she spent a lot of her life in Paris. She was a floating sushi restaurant at one stage. She was also a disco nightclub in the shadow of the Eiffel Tower. And the story she could tell, I imagine. Now, directly in front of us there now is an apartment block, and underneath that you see a wee blue sign for a place called the Dock Cafe. That's Belfast's only honesty cafe. You go in there and you get coffee and a wee bun, and you just pay whatever you think it's worth to you into a donation box. Now this lovely little stretch of grass to your left here, wouldn't it look fantastic as a picnic area or a play park? Maybe not quite as nice as a hotel, but that is what is being planned for it. The ground is for sale with planning permission granted for a new hotel to be put there. If you look over to your right hand side, the thing in front of Nomadic is a caisson or water gate, and that would have been lifted up, turned sideways, slotted into grooves in the dock wall. Filled with water, it would have sunk down and acted as a plug in the dock. Then they were able to adjust the water level by raising and lowering the caisson. There were two, and sadly now there's just one, and this one, as you can see, does need a wee bit of restoration work done on it. Now, if you haven't already stood in the Titanic sign in those letters, you have to do that before you leave. It's now a legal requirement. We don't want the police chasing you up the road telling you off. That is actually the thickness of the steel plate that was used on Titanic. And ahead of us there, in front of us to the right, you see those two buildings with grey triangular roofs. Those are the drawing offices where they designed Titanic and 1,000 other ships. And as we turn to go along the front of the Titanic building here, if you look down on the ground all around the building, you'll notice there's dark grey tiled areas. Well, they represent land, and then all the light tiled areas are sea. So what you have there is an aerial view map of the world, and at the back of the Titanic building there's a little brass line, and you can follow Titanic's journey along that line. So here we are, folks, back right where we began. Thank you ever so much for coming along with us. I do hope you enjoy the rest of your time here. Thank you very much, folks.